Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
My friend told me of an abandoned psych ward in my town, so one day my girl and I hiked up there and scouted the place. It appeared that it was abandoned and gutted, but that a construction crew had set up shop in there as well. Basically a gutted building with ladders, scaffolding, lights, and other stuff. We didn't want a ticket for trespassing, so we just walked around for a while. Every few days we went back to investigate. After about a month we noticed that nothing, was moving. As if the psych ward staff and ownership and residents not only abandoned it, but so did the construction crew who were remodeling it. So, being the adventurers we were, we broke in. We scouted the inside, making sure there wasn't anybody around. We expected birds and squirrels to make it their home, being late August by this point, but no signs of animals were around. Eventually we began to hear low snarling and pacing footsteps, almost like large dogs stalking us. But we never could see any. We got freaked out and began to get out when we heard dogs barking and lashing out at their full voice. We could hear claws running behind us, vicious snarls, and even fighting. The whole place smelled like it was catching fire and it was getting intensely hot. The moment we set foot outside onto the grounds, all sounds, smells, and heat stopped. It's been 3.5 years and the construction crew never did come back for their belongings.
I live in an apartment complex that used to be a mental hospital in the 1940s. Only half of the buildings had been renovated. The rest were boarded up and dilapidated messes. Friend says he wants to go exploring through them. Tell him I'm not going. He calls me a chicken. Don't care, the walls are filled with asbestos. He goes with some other friends. At this point in the story I'm just going off of what they said. They're doing their stupid teenager stuff trying to spook each other. That's when they hear someone else walking the halls. Either a homeless guy or the police, so they decide to book it. As they're running they hit a soft spot on the floor. They go right through the second story down to the basement, tearing everything apart as they fell. Confused, injured, and in the dark they don't know what's going on. There were 2 homeless guys already in the basement with them, just flipping their shit, screaming at them. They ran like they never ran before. They had a few broken bones and their cuts got infected from crashing through a rotted out floor. They had to tell their parents what happened and they all got in some serious trouble. The building was torn down shortly after.
When I was 11, I lived down the street from an abandoned house that was covered in painted handprints. The place scared the shit out of me. One day when I was a little older, me and a buddy of mine worked up the courage to go investigate. The whole garage was covered in writing, most of it was random gibberish. It said things like they found the space and time has fallen to the depths of fate, and painted along the front in large letters was the word faithless. The weirdest part was the fact that a lot of the writing was talking about how he missed his father and that his body was talking to him or some shit. The inside was covered in paint, every fucking room. One room had creepy faces on the ceiling and dark shadow people on the walls. It was the only room like this, all the others had random paint splashes. The only thing left in the whole house was an old mattress, a few pieces of wood, and a bunch of paint cans. Needless to say, we didn't stay that long, the whole place gave off a weird vibe. When I asked around, nobody would talk about it, they just said it's always been like this. I tried going back a few years later, but the house had been renovated. To this day I still wonder if the words had any real meaning. Maybe it was in code, or maybe the guy was nuts, who knows.
Kinda a long story, but I used to do quite a bit of urban exploration a few years back, and I was kind of surprised to hear the other side of a story I've been telling for the longest time. It's really changed the way I tell the story. Basically, I was worried as shit whenever I went into places, because I know almost every abandoned apartment building, factory, or asylum around here hasn't been worked on due to asbestos and other crap. The companies just find it cheaper to leave the lot and nobody wants to pay the absurd cleanup costs. Anyway, when I went to these places, I have my great kit of safety gear on and everything. Full face respirator, hood, thick clothing, rubber gloves, etc. I'm not one of those lithe, nimble, urban ninjas who parkour their way through these places and leave everything untouched. No, I just kind of trundle my way through because almost nobody is around. I've cut locks, unboarded windows, and even taken out a brick wall just to fully explore some places. I was a one-man expedition force. At the time, my mental health issues were pretty widely unchecked, so I was convinced that exploring dangerous places alone was actually the best thing to do. I did worry about running into insane hobos and such, but I felt like I could talk my way out of anything if it came down to it. It's pretty hard to understand someone with a mask over their mouth unless you've worked with them for some time, so I had hooked up a little microphone and put a speaker on my pack of gear I carried around. There's an old asylum out on the highway towards what was a construction site for the longest time. Now the construction site is a business park and the asylum was finally trashed, but it was probably one of the most popular places for urban explorers years ago. When I went there, the first thing I noticed was the wall of signatures in the lobby of all the people who went through and the dates they stayed. Graffiti was everywhere. Anything of value was trashed or stolen, and almost every room spray-painted with silly warnings of "keep the fuck out" was just boring ancient hobo dens. The basement was a maze of storage rooms with nothing of value left, but the place was big enough that it took me a few hours to get a good layout. Plenty of scribbled messages on the walls, some probably written by the genuinely crazy homeless people, but most of them were probably written by the other 100 people who explored this place before. It was pretty boring, and disappointing too, so I did what enough people had done before and started to carve spooky messages into the plaster walls. Real childish shit like, "Where am I?" or "I can't get out," but it was about the same quality as the rest of the graffiti. As I was packing up, just about to leave, I started to hear footsteps from one of the upper floors. Probably more would-be explorers are about to be disappointed, so I figured I'd go meet up with them and maybe swap stories. Best luck I ever had, I heard them coming down the staircase just as I was heading towards it. I called them a good hello, but I winced when the speaker I was using came out at shout-like volume. They stopped coming down the stairs by the sound of it, and I could hear them whispering. No reply, but all I see is a head lean around the corner of the stairs, look right at me, and scream. I was fucking scared at the time, and I didn't know what to say, so I shouted the first thing that came to mind. It didn't hit me until later, but the last thing you'd want to hear out of an old radio speaker carried by a faceless 6'8" pile of jackets and gear is, "I'm a human. I'm a human. Don't run away." For the longest time I was telling that story like I met up with some ghost, but last summer I was met a guy who didn't have any stories of his own, but shared one of a friend. His friend found a monster in that asylum basement that said it was human and chased him out. I told him my story after and we had a great laugh out of it. Weird as fuck.
Reminds me of something I did once. Exploring an old factory. Bit boring really, all things of interest or value had been removed years ago. About to leave when I hear noises behind me. I am not alone. At the time, I was wearing a ski mask and goggles. Sounds strange, but it stops my face from being seen by any camera and it keeps dust and shit out of my hair/face/eyes. I was also wearing a jacket, pants, boots and gloves, so essentially you couldn't see any of my skin. Anyway, briefly shit myself thinking it's security or spoopy skeletons. Then I hear their voices.
"Bill, I really don't want to go in there."
"Come on honey, just for 5 minutes.
"But it's so fucking creepy."
We'll be fine."
Realize that some guy has taken his reluctant girlfriend urbexing. Devious plan comes to mind. As quietly as I can, stash my bag behind a pile of cardboard boxes nearby. Strike the kind of pose at a shop Mannequin would be in. Remain as still as possible. After about 2 minutes of waiting, they found me. The guy jumps back, the girl screams.
Relax, honey, it's just a mannequin.
Bill, why the fuck is there a mannequin in a factory?
People probably dump stuff here all the time.
Bill moves slightly ahead, but the girl comes closer to me.
It's so fucking creepy.
She says again, looking up at me. Suddenly, I turn my head so I'm looking right at her. If you think I'm creepy, you should see the other guy. She lets out a scream as though she's being poked by a red-hot iron. Bill yells too. Wait until I can't hear them running anymore. Leave the factory and drive home laughing. For some reason it really reminded me of that last scene in Toy Story where Woody scares Sid by talking to him.
Me and some friends went to an abandoned hospital asylum. This place is located miles in a woods and way up a mountain. Close by there was a small house. We concluded that this was where the security janitor guy lived. We were in the boiler room in the basement when we heard a loud scream coming from the ground floor. A distinct, short, high-pitched scream. All three of us heard it clearly, freaked and ran the hell out, running past where we heard the scream. We checked outside to see if it was a person screwing with us, or telling us to get the hell of their property. Never mind ghosts, we didn't want to get caught. Went back in after at least 15 minutes of searching and explored some more. It had taken us hours to get here, so we were pretty set on completing the tour. Which reminds me, I haven't even properly checked the photos I took yet, and this was 6 months ago. Unfortunately, I know I wasn't filming when we first entered the building. So dumb. The atmosphere has changed now. Colder, darker, moisture from our breath suspended motionless in the air. We felt like we were being followed the entire 2 hours we were there, and wherever we went, we had the sense of being rushed. Staying too long and it got physically uncomfortable. We intended on setting up a camp to spend the night, but decided not to. No special reason, just cold outright? We drove halfway home before sleeping in the car. Could have been a person, could have been wildlife, but we heard that scream and we knew we were alone. Or should I say not alone?
I hardly ever post anything long, so bear with me. Be on holiday with a few mates in the Isle of Wight. Let's call them T, D and C. All other people our age were abroad drinking and screwing around, but oh well. We decide one day to get out on a hike along the coast just for the hell of it. About 30 minutes in, we find a line of old coastal defenses from World War II. It's exploring time.jpg. It's worth pointing out now that me and T are quite into outdoor activities, almost to the point of preppers, so we were carrying a fair bit of gear. There were quite a few collapsed pillar boxes and sentry posts dotted around the area, but the most interesting was a highly walled gun placement with no obvious door. T pulls out a bit of climbing rope out of his bag and we form a makeshift rope ladder. I throw it into a small hole high up and tie it off. We elect C to climb up first since he's the smallest, and since I'm reasonably fit, I could catch him if he fell. C climbs up with no problem and reports a small open hatch on the roof. D climbs up next, followed by me. As T was climbing, the knot slips and he falls down. T wasn't badly hurt by the fall, but he didn't fancy trying again, so he decided to have a look around the base of the fort, as we called it. Meanwhile, up on the roof we were trying to work out what was the best way to get down into the bunker. We decide in the end to properly tie the rope onto an exposed bit of steel cable. This time I'm elected to go first as there was a funky smell coming from the hatch. We joked about how it's either a crack den or a murder site, spooked ourselves a little. Armed with a Mora knife and a hatchet, I descended into the bunker. The interior is filthy with trash and general dirt, so we assumed that local kids used it as a hangout. D comes down the rope behind me, but C decides to stay as a lookout. Me and D go into the main part of the bunker and see the words, "Sure Death," spray painted on an iron plate on the wall. pic shows a bit of the bunker and the iron plate that covered one of the windows. A little freaked out, me and D carry on further into the bunker when we come across an open blast door and a flight of stairs. Putting on our headlamps, we go down the stairs, the smell of damp and something else getting stronger with every step we take. When we got to the bottom of the stairs, there was another room with another door, this one rusted and sealed shut. T calls out from the outside,
"How you guys faring in there?"
Me and D hear a voice, slightly muffled from the other side of the door.
"You should leave, your friends are getting worried."
Me and D look at each other and then nope the fuck out of there. D reaches the rope first and climbs up. As I reach the rope, I'm sure I heard footsteps coming up the stairs behind me. Me, D and C grab our backpacks from the roof, jump down and run like the hounds of hell were after us. Once we got back to where we were staying, we realized that we had left T's climbing rope behind, so we agreed to go back the next day. T and C were obviously skeptical about our story, so D said they could go inside next time. The next day, we arrive back at the bunker and I have to let C stand on my shoulders to climb back onto the roof. C calls down,
Guys, where's the rope?"
T is getting pissy at this point, so I have to get him onto the roof as well, so he calls to see if it's gone for himself. Whilst they were up on the roof, me and D walked around the base of the bunker to see if it was T messing with us the day before. Our faces when the bunker was solid concrete all around the sides, no obvious door. T and C jumped down saying that the rope was nowhere to be seen and that we owed him a new one. We put the disappearing rope down to bored youth just to make T feel better. But holy shit, I never want to go urbexing again.
Be about 17. Working with my dad. Doing an inspection on this old church the owners want to sell. They give us a key for the front door. Open it and immediately get hit with cold air. The church is pretty large, but all one room. Everything is decorated in red. Red pews, red carpet, red curtains. Most were open, but little sunlight was coming in. It was about 4 o'clock, so the sun was setting and the light came through in beams. Dust everywhere on everything. One set of footprints leading to a set of stairs behind the podium. Figure it was the owner or another inspector. It leads down to the sub-basement. Yeah, okay, fuck this. Step down and immediately get chills. Dad's a badass mofo, doesn't give a shit, just wants to finish and get out. He says, "You feel that?" I replied with yeah. Finish and walk back up. He cuts ahead of me, putting me behind him. I say, "Stop being an asshole, this isn't funny." My back's to the darkness. Push past him, run up the stairs, and start walking to the front door. That's when I notice more sets of footprints leading to the pews that were not there before. Oh shit. We get out and lock the door. That was about it until a week later when my dad and one of his employees went back and replaced some pipe so it would be up to code. They used the key to get in the front door and head to the basement. The basement was about the size of the church upstairs. The room that we inspected that contained the heater was in one of the corners. It had its own light that was always on. The rest of the room was dark, so you had to walk through darkness to get from the stairs to the room. Support pillars on either side of you. They get in the room and start working. My dad turns around to find the lights on. Huge fluorescent lights illuminating the entire basement. Have no fucking idea how they turned on. A few minutes later turn back around and darkness. Nothing but the far-off light coming from the stairs. Finish up and start walking back to the stairs. Lights turn back on and start to flicker. He and Kent start getting chills. Bolt for the stairs. Get back up and quickly leave and lock the front door. They decided to have lunch outside in the truck before leaving for the next job. Around that time the owner showed up and they started talking to him. They asked him why the church was boarded up in the first place. The owner told him that apparently 2 or 3 years ago the pastor had shot and killed 2 homeless kids in the basement for trying to steal canned food out of the pantry and was convicted of murder. I guess the place got really dark and the church kinda disbanded after that.
I came across an abandoned town a few months ago. Be me. Driving around somewhere upstate. I don't need to be home, so I'm taking my time. See a dirt road big enough for a car. Let's do this. .jpg. I go down the road and reach a town surrounded by woods. Rolling around the streets, houses still standing. The weird thing is that all the curtains are pulled so you can't see in the house. Get a feeling as if I'm being watched. Something gets my attention. It's a 57 Bel Air in somebody's driveway. Being a car fan, I park my car and go look at the Bel Air. Rusted like hell, flat tires. I see the paper that you get from the dealership on the window, the one that shows the MSRP. I get weirded out even more cause this car was brand fucking new and it was just here. I yank on the door, it opens. The interior is almost perfect. Get even more weirded out. Keys are in the ignition. Oh God. I start thinking something killed whoever was about to start it, like some nuclear explosion. As I'm about to crank the key, I see a fucking face in the window of the house it's parked in. Nope. Bolt out of the Bel Air and get into my car. Speed away and don't look back. About 5 minutes later, I noticed I pulled the Bel Air's key from the ignition without realizing it. I still have them lying around somewhere. I also tried to go back with some friends, but I couldn't find the road again. Damn shame too. I wanted to go into the houses and see if that was a person.
This happened to me in St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada back in 2011. I think I may have brought it up a few times before, I'm not sure. If you're familiar with St. John's, you may or may not have seen the Grace Hospital, a maternity hospital. It was torn down from the top down back in 2007-ish, and had supposedly been abandoned for a couple of years before then. Well, anyways, fast forward to 2011. What's left of the Grace Hospital is just one massive field, which was somehow sad because I was born there. I walked through that field often as a shortcut between places, and many times I'd often hear noises, but I'd mistake them to be the sound of the city considering the road was pretty close. Now, here's where the interesting bit comes in. I have this friend, who's a bit of a man-child. We've been friends since grade school and he just didn't seem to grow up mentally. He has the mind of a 10th grader. When I was off my work hours, me and him would walk around downtown and we'd hang out in the field. He told me he stumbled across something one night when he was with his brother, and he brought up the noises we'd mistake for city noises. He had supposedly brought shovels to the field a few hours before we hung out, and his plan was to show me what he and his brother thought he found, right? He brought me to a dirt pile which seems like it was recently dug out and crammed back in, and so we both started digging into it and found a hallway underneath the field that seemed half caved in. Turns out that when they tore down the building, they just said fuck it and left the basement in. Of course, the basement was mostly caved in, but there were a few pockets here and there without caved in. There was graffiti on the walls, presumably wrote there before the building was torn down, and there were typical hospital signs. It was dark, and so my friend took out his cell phone and used it as a flashlight, and we explored for a bit. There was what appeared to be a power generator room, coated in dust, with a few trolleys scattered in the hall and in the room. There was also a half-collapsed room that looked like a medical storage room. There were old syringes, needles, and shit everywhere. There was a bloody bandage on the floor too. None of us thought anything of it though. Nothing could be living down here that would be threatening, and we were writing for the most part. There was also a door, and it was near the area in which we dug into. However, we saved that door for last, which was now. My friend grabbed the knob before me because I was a wuss, and the fucker got a splinter. Instead of freaking out, he took it as an opportunity and used his bloody finger as a pencil to write on the wall, "We were here, June 2011, in red." He also included the exact date, however I'm not one to remember. So we opened the door, and we were met by a rotten stench. There was a rotten stench before, but it wasn't as powerful as this. My friend's phone's batteries died and we only had the light of the hole we dug out, so we could barely see anything. Dust was flying in the air due to the disturbances we were making, giving the place a dark brown tint. We could see metal shelves in this room, but that's about it given our visibility, and given how long this room was, it could have been another hall. However, I'm not exactly sure. We reached a dead end though, as there was another cave-in in this room. We saw a silhouette, and I had to squint to see better. Sticking out of the rubble was a yellow construction helmet. I told my friend and so he picked it up. He didn't seem to notice what was under it though, and put the helmet on his head. In the pile was what appeared to be a half-buried human skull, right where the helmet used to be. The problem was that the skull only had one eye socket, on its left side. As my vision started to adjust, I could see what appeared to be an inanimate hand skeleton. However, it only had 2 fingers and a thumb. There were no fractures. It seemed to reach out lifelessly from the bottom of the pile, as if whoever owned that fucked up mutated hand tried to grasp for life as he was being crushed. There was what also appeared to be a rib cage on the floor, and the only way I noticed this was because I stumbled back in shock from the odd skull and the hand and stepped on it. The rib was sharp and cut into my foot, because I was only wearing sandals as I was unaware of this expedition before it happened. My friend was shocked and so we both got out of there. We filled the hole up and never set foot in there again. Don't believe me? If you're near St. John's, dig in that field. I guarantee you will find a hallway with all of the things we found, including our little message, "We were here, June 2011, and the exact date." Before you call this bullshit, check it out yourself.
B15. Go to live with my uncle for a month or 2 while my father fixes financial situation. Uncle lives in St. Augustine, Florida. He's a fucking nutjob, believes in demons and paranormal occurrences. First 2 weeks go by, pretty nice place, lovely old town. Spend most of my time outside, since I only have one TV, no cable, no video games, and don't really explore the house much. Having a kick about in the streets while uncle is gone. Kick the soccer ball into the backyard. Go look for the ball, it's nowhere to be seen in the backyard, or in the area surrounding. Bummed out, I go back inside and sit in my room and just read the Silmarillion. An hour later it's dark, so I decide to look around the house. Find a half door that I had never noticed before. Go down a few steps and turn a corner. A fucking flawlessly white room except fucking teeth scattered everywhere in the room. 2 sets of old colonial Spanish armor. 5 bottles of what I assume was piss. An oven-sized hole in the ground/side of the house looking out into the surrounding area, with vines and plants almost overgrown the hole. 1 soccer ball. I fucking lost it and never went near that door again. I assume my uncle found out that I went down there because I just left my soccer ball, but I found it in the area that the hole opens up to the next day. My uncle still treated me the same after that day too, so I don't think it really mattered.
Not that spoopy, but might as well contribute. Be about 15, me and a few buddies go to an abandoned house near where we live. Go inside, everything seems normal for it being abandoned. Torn walls, graffiti, all that shit. We notice a red kind of paint on the wall. This shit wasn't painted, it had started to fade to a browny kind of color like blood. It scares us a bit, but we brush it off. Keep exploring and there's a few rooms, all of them smell fucking rancid. Go into one with a mirror in it and turn on a flashlight. Something that was us moves. British.t. We shit our pants and barge out the door to the room. Run to the front door, which is boarded up, and charge at it as hard as we all can and bust it down. Keep in mind, it's 4 a.m. We're all tired as fuck, so we sleep in the garage beside it. We had bags full of stuff, food, beers, cigarettes, all that shit. Get up the next morning and go to the closest shop, which is about 15 minutes away. Come back and our shit is all over the place. Wonder what the fuck happened. Nobody comes to this house and nobody sees us go in or leave. Nothing was taken, just shit thrown all over the place. Shit ourselves and don't go back. It got fixed up and made into a nice house for a family. Hope they don't have a spoopy ghost in there.
Sorta scary. Read online about a haunted abandoned library in a really small town. Make the 40+ mile drive there with 2 friends. Finally arrive. Town is sparse as fuck. See nobody outside, then again it was winter. Make it to the library. It's a 2-story brick building with a bunch of the windows broken. To avoid getting into trouble, we parked the car several blocks away and walked there. Head inside, rows and rows of bookshelves with lots of old dusty books on them, books all over the floor too. Walk around a bit. Don't find anything too creepy aside from the sound of the wind howling outside. Head up to the 2nd floor. This one is even more run down than the first and is pretty spooky. Tons of books and shelves in a pile that somebody tried to burn but failed to. Suddenly I hear voices. All 3 of us freeze and make no sound. Sounds of laughing coming from downstairs. We look at the window. There's a parked car and evidently some other people had the same idea as we did. I say we should just leave. My friend gets a better idea. He runs over to the bookshelf, screams as loudly and creepily as possible, and knocks it over, causing a huge thump sound. Hear the people freaking out downstairs. I go to the stairs and peer around the corner. In the main hallway I see 2 teenage kids with no flashlight frozen in place looking at the ceiling. After a while they keep moving and go to check out the basement. Friend drags an empty bookshelf in front of the doors to block them off. We go near the entrance to the basement. They're down there talking about the scream they heard. One of us slams the door to the basement shut. They scream and start running, presumably to the door. We hide behind a large reception desk and wait. Eventually they come out of the basement screaming and running to get out of the building. They reach the blocked off main doors. They freak out and start running to go upstairs. My friends and I start throwing books at their backs as they run. We hear screaming. Run up to see what happened. They jumped out of the fucking window. Look down at the snow-covered ground. One of them is bleeding and has a leg bent weird and the other is just sprawled out on the ground. It was a fairly high jump. The limper drags the face down one to the car crying and drives away. Feel kind of bad about it. Later on local news there's a story about it. They reported it. They didn't die. One had a broken leg and the other one just got knocked out and was fine. We're probably immortalized in that little town's folklore now.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Oh,